Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1299th New Social Environment. I'm Magali, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today. Dyani White Hawk turns a critical eye toward the construction of American art history. She lays bare the exclusionary hierarchies that have long governed cultural legitimacy, authority, value, and visibility. Her paintings, sculptures, and installations ask viewers to consider how such structures shape not only aesthetic judgment and cultural memory, but also the terms of community itself. In this light, White Hawk reframes Indigenous art and Western abstraction as inseparable practices linked by a shared history that dominant narratives have labored to separate and obscure. And our host today, Laura Phipps, is an associate curator at the Whitney Museum of American Art, where she has recently organized 60 Surreal, and Mary Heilman, Longline. In 2023, Phipps organized Joan Quick to See Smith Memory Map, the largest and most comprehensive exhibition of the artist's work, and edited the accompanying catalog. And with that, I will hand it over to Laura to get us started.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for being here. I yeah, was thrilled to get the invitation to talk with Dyani and in particular about her current exhibition at the Walker Art Center, Love Language. And I just, yeah, want to express I don't know, my gratitude to be in conversation with Dyani, who's an artist that I've been really fortunate to see over many years. Her work in exhibitions all over the country, from Santa Fe and Indianapolis and Maryland. I was like realizing how many different places I've gotten to, in different sort of environments, I've gotten to experience Dyani's work, Philadelphia, and then, of course, in my own backyard here at the Whitney, both in the 22 biennial, which I think we'll see that work later in this slideshow, but also really sort of permanently and get to live with a work of Dyani's large scale work called Nourish, which is on the museum's 8th floor and really creates this beautiful space for people to be in community in our cafe where they can be nourished as well. Dyani's generosity of spirit, I think, is evident in all of the places where I've seen her work because it comes through in the work and at every sort of stage of interaction we've ever had. But something I think we'll all see today is how that generosity extends through this exhibition in particular. And I also wanted to thank, before we start, Sarah Tonko and Dyani Studio, who helped me experience Love Language. I have not been to Minneapolis to see it yet, but Sarah shared all the beautiful didactics, the programming, and even helped me see the show in FaceTime the other day. So I hope that I can bring some of that experience to you all as well, since we are not in this space together. And thank you also to Magali for putting together this beautiful PowerPoint with Sarah. If we want to go back to the beginning, actually, of the slideshow, one of the things that really struck me in sort of absorbing all of the materials from this exhibition, and then I promise we'll get to the artwork and to talk about it. But one thing I wanted to, or something that was so clear to me, I think, in understanding the exhibition that Dyani put together, which is, from what I understand, sort of a 15-year survey, in some ways retrospective, in some ways just a sort of pointing at all of the different aspects of Dyani's practice. But the thing that was really clear is how thoughtfully considered every aspect of the exhibition is, and sort of every sense from the flow of the galleries, the specific examples of works that were chosen, the opening program. And I was particularly struck with how at the outset of the exhibition and in many of the programs as well, and here I again give thanks that all of this is so available. The way the exhibition is acknowledged, this sort of place setting, which also is a history and I think a sort of individual position setting. And you can see the words here in front of you that greet you in the exhibition. And I just, because the exhibition starts in this place, because I know that uh, place and history are sort of the bedstones, I think, of Dyani's practice. I wanted to put this up so everyone else could sort of experience the way that you were sort of greeted and allowed to understand and experience the show. So I don't know, Dyani, if you want to say anything about this, something that was sort of unique to me, an exhibition acknowledgement. I think we're all sort of familiar with land acknowledgements as sometimes, unfortunately, sort of rote resuscitations of where one is located, but this felt sort of above and beyond and gave viewers really the knowledge to experience the work in its fullness.
Yeah, definitely. I was really excited about this statement and honored that the curators took it on upon themselves, like self-assigned, um, a land acknowledgement in a way that is written very specifically for this exhibition, and then very specifically for the collaboration between the Walker Arts Center and the Ramey Modern in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm really, it's really important to me, and I'm really excited about the fact that, you know, that this exhibition starts and is happening in its first iteration here in Minnesota, in Minnesota, in Dakota homelands. There has been a great deal of a tremendous rift and harm that has happened between the Walker Arts Center and our local Indigenous communities, but that ripples out beyond just our local Indigenous communities, and it impacts underrepresented communities within the Twin Cities and well beyond the Twin Cities. And we know that this is the case with many, many, many institutions. You know, a great deal of the work that so many of us are doing is about looking at the way that institutions have operated thus far, and how do we take a critical lens to the way, and when I say institution, I mean broadly, right? Like the institution of academia, the institution of museums, of galleries, of society, of, you know, the ways that humans have created hierarchies that have built up some and devalued others, and the harm that that's done over time. And as artists, you know, we're often at the forefront of helping to create opportunities for conversations to think critically about the way that our institutions have worked up until now, and how do we dream towards, you know, better futures. And so the collaboration between the Walker Arts Center and, you know, specifically Siri Ingberg, who is the curator for this exhibition, and Tara Hogue, who's the curator from the Ramey Modern, their collaboration and their commitment to supporting Native people and Native artists is really represented strongly in this acknowledgement. So land acknowledgements have become, you know, they're a really important tool. It's a really important tool to help people to frame and understand the realities of the history of this land base, of this nation, of this continent, and the way that colonization has happened over time and continues to happen and continues to play out. And the effects of that are very much active and alive today. And so even just acknowledging, you know, that these issues are foundational to so much of our current environment, and affect the way that we see and understand our world, affect the way that we see and understand the arts, affect the way that we see and understand one another. It's so important to frame some of the core issues and then talk about how we move forward. And so, but sometimes, you know, people, you know, there's been a lot of moments of, you know, well, a museum or an institution thinks it needs to write a land acknowledgement, that that's part of, you know, cultural protocol today. So they do it, but there's not a lot of action behind it. And then it feels like yet another wound, you know? And so having, because they brought this to me to read, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like, you wrote a land acknowledgement specific to the exhibition and specific to your collaboration, and why the collaboration across the medicine line or between a US-based and Canadian-based museum institutions that are both located and situated within Indigenous land bases and adjacent to Indigenous communities, why that partnership is important, and how that this particular, how these museums have been looking at and really actively thinking about how they're going to support and help and nurture forward movement, and look at the thing honestly and openly, because that's how we move past things, right? Like you have to take a really honest look, what are the, founding challenges, and then how do we address those? So I love that we have the opportunity to just start with that here. I'm not going to read it because it's been up for a long time, so I'm sure a lot of you have taken the time to breeze through. But I was really honored that they took this assignment to themselves, that this was something that curators wanted to do. And that's just such a great example of how you take a model, the land acknowledgement model, and then move that into action.
Yeah, thank you, Danny, for sharing all of that. And I feel like that's what was really striking to me. And it also, it really signals the collaborative effort that went into this exhibition, which I think is then mirrored in so much of your practice. So it feels like such a connected statement. So I thought we could sort of walk through the show, essentially, see how it unfolds at the Walker and all of these sort of different spaces and galleries. And I know you had mentioned that the show is vaguely chronological, which we can get to. I realized actually before I even get there, I haven't even asked you about the title, Love Language. And it's such a beautiful title that is very evocative, but maybe would you mind, I don't know, unpacking it for us a little bit, what it means to you?
Sure. One last thing that I want to say on the previous comment around the statement. I think it's also important for people to understand that Siri Engberg is a non-native curator here at the Twin City, at the Walker, that's been here for over 30 years. So she has a tremendous amount of experience and history with the Walker, and she's a phenomenal curator. And then Tara Hogue is an Indigenous curator, Métis curator from Canada. And a younger curator, but just brilliant. And the two of them together, I think have really, like, that collaboration goes beyond just institution to institution and cross-border, but it's also between these two people, these two individuals that come from, unique backgrounds, but have this invested commitment to, how they're going to support Native artists in the growth of their respective institutions. So I wanted to put that out there because I realize not everybody knows who Sarah or who Siri and Tara are, but I do. So I want to make sure y'all understood that. But the title, Love Language, so I had to write for this exhibition before the exhibition existed, because there were pieces that I wanted to make that I knew it would be to my best advantage if I had some financial support to create them. We'll get to them towards the end of the slideshow. But a large scale sculpture, and then some new glass mosaic works. And I wanted to be able to help support that financially. I didn't want to lean too hardly on galleries or other forms of support. And so I wrote for grant and fellowship support to help create those works that I knew I wanted to have as a part of this exhibition. So I had to write those proposals, at the very early stages of planning of our exhibition. And so we utilized the language that I had written in those proposals to frame the entire exhibit. And so expressing to the granting organizations, which I'll give them their shout outs, was Creative Capital and Guggenheim foundations. They helped support the creation of those works. I was trying to express to them, that the history of the Walker and its relationship with the Native community, the challenges that we will be facing in creating an exhibition within the walls of the Walker, and then making damn sure that the Native community felt exceptionally good in that space, and that it was an opportunity for healing and for nurturing, and for the Native community to feel ownership and to feel agency and to feel a part of that space in a way that they hadn't previously. And so I organized my thoughts into 4 categories, which are now the 4 foundational themes of the exhibition, which are see, honor, nurture, and celebrate. And I talked about the ways that I wanted the audience to be able to see us as Indigenous people, to see our histories, to see our contemporary realities, to see our contributions to art history, to see the way that we have impacted the art history of this continent in a way that it is not taught, but in a way that it is very real. And I wanted communities to be able to honor, our Native people, to honor our existences, to honor our humanity, to honor our gifts, to honor us, as people, to ask people, and this goes to non-Native audiences as well as Native audiences, and all people. And I'll get to that in just a moment, but then the third concept is to nurture. How do we nurture one another? How do we nurture a community? How do we cross-culturally nurture one another? How do we nurture artistic practices? How do we nurture the development of arts so that Native artists are given the same kind of depth and investment of big opportunities as our peers? And then the last category is celebrate, to celebrate, who we are, to celebrate our profound artistic histories, to celebrate the beautiful people in our communities, to celebrate our resilience, our talent, our artistry. And so we'll see it as we move through. This is all early work, so this is in the seeing section. But as I thought about what I wanted the work to do and what I wanted the exhibition to do, they're all expressions of love. To see somebody, to nurture somebody, to honor somebody, to celebrate somebody, those are all acts of love. It's how we practice our relationality. It's how we practice respect and gratitude. And so for me, it's all about, it's my love letter to my community, to my ancestors, and to every single person that walks in that exhibition, because the goal is really that everybody that walks into this space feels nurtured by the space, feels uplifted and hopefully inspired.
Yeah. I to be repetitive, I love that. But I love that they're all words and terms that are felt terms, right? That people can sort of understand within their own framework. I am also struck by how see, honor, nurture, and celebrate are not finite phases in life or cycles. They, are a part of sort of the ways that we develop and grow, but we come back and we cycle back through all of these different sort of ways of being in relation with folks. And I was thinking about that and thinking about the organization of the show and the way that it has this, uh, you know, relies on chronology in some places, but then disrupts that as well. And I think both feel like, I don't know, a very flexible sort of statements against the pressure of linearity, against the ideas of sort of specifically artistic progress or time in this sort of linear way that, see, honor, nurture, and celebrate are reoccurring and have this sort of yeah, circular nature. So I was interested in seeing those moments in the show as well, where you are putting works from different time periods together to show this sort of relationship to your practice and also to life and the things that are going on within. I was one of the things that I think is really striking too throughout your practice, but especially the way that the exhibition is organized, highlights the different mediums that you're using. And here I mean specifically sort of thinking sculpturally in 3 dimensions, thinking in 2 dimensions. This slide is sort of a great example of that, but I'd love to hear a little bit. Maybe this isn't, doesn't have an exact answer, but when what you're sort of feeling and wanting to express reveals itself in a particular form, how are you making those decisions?
I guess I'm listening. I my studio practice is always it's easiest for me to frame it that it's grounded in painting and beadwork, and then everything kind of sprouts out from there. Because I do consider myself primarily, like, first and foremost, those are my two the practices that, like, if everything else fell away, I'd be just fine. Like, I'd be all right. I mean, maybe I'd feel a little constricted, but I'd figure it out. I am fulfilled by those, and I continue to go back to them over and over and over again. So the other pieces, that have come out of the continual pursuit of painting and the continual pursuit of practicing beadwork, and um in the earlier years, porcupine quill work. I haven't done the actual stitching within the works for a while, but I reference it regularly still. Um, Everything else is about, how has been in response to how to get to a particular idea, and how that's going to be best represented. And there's been times where it's really about, like, digging in and figuring out, like, okay, this is the idea or the topic that I really want to get to. Like with these pieces, this is the Carrie series. These came out of a desire to present an opportunity to critique our categories that we have upheld within museum and art history. So there have been a lot of categories that have helped other Native art to place it outside of ideas of art with a capital A, whether that's anthropological or ethnographic or craft or design or self-taught. But sometimes it's as simple as function. If something is a functional object, it's no longer art with a capital A. And I just think it's such a short-sighted viewpoint, because the reality is Indigenous art forms were in a different cultural context. And so even though it is, our works have historically all been functional, it's because they were they were all encompassing part of life. It wasn't something that was separated into museum and gallery spaces. But profoundly exquisite, amazing, rigorous work has been produced and adorned functional objects. And the relationships between the making and the receiver, or the making and the use of those objects, is embedded with ideas and concepts and philosophies. And all of the work it's so much more than design. It's so much more than, making something functional pretty. It's, all of these works are embedded with philosophy. They're embedded with histories. They're embedded with personal concepts and cultural concepts. And so it is deeply thought about intellectual work, along with being, exempling tremendous artistic prowess as well. So by creating the Carrie series, it was about, well, I want to break down this idea of, like, well, if something's functional, it's not art. It's just, I think all art serves a function, right? Even if that art is simply to provide a critique on the last generation's ideas, that's a function, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just different functions at different times in different contexts. But to place one above the other because you have decided this function is higher than this function, it just creates roadblocks in our opportunities for thinking and for connection and for digging deeper into the value of different human forms of human expression. And then, I've done, video work and photo installation work, and those images will come up too. But those, again, it's about like, okay, so there's a topic that I want to discuss. For the photo installation that we'll see in a little bit, like that piece, I was just discussing it this weekend. That piece was like a challenge was presented to me to give a talk on the topic of women's rights in Native community, which is like an extremely challenging topic riddled with tremendous amounts of legacies of violence. And I was like, and the people who were holding the event were told me like, you got 7 minutes. It's like, I can't talk about that history and actually have the people in the audience understand it and its real impact in 7 minutes.
Right.
And so the photo installation actually comes from a performance piece that we did that was in my response. I was like, if I'm going to give them this information, it needs to hit them so profoundly that they walk out of here and they can't forget it. And so we did this performance piece, and it was a really good and powerful experience. And then my mom was like, you have to figure out how to make that happen more than like 2 nights, because we performed it 2 different times. She's like, it's gotta live on. So figure out how to make it live on. So this is the photo installation. And I worked with my friend Tom Jones. Anything that's like outside of beadwork and woodwork and things I do in my studio are collaborative works with people that are experts in what they do. So my friend Tom Jones is a phenomenal photographer, and he came and he traded with me art for photography and helped us create a photo installation of that performance piece that allowed us the opportunity to talk about the statistics of violence against Native women. But that came out of necessity, and it came to me when I said listening earlier, like I could not figure out how I was going to do this in 7 minutes. It was such a huge challenge, and I was scared of it, and I didn't know, what I was going to do. And so I went for a run, and I was praying when I was out on my run, and this performance piece popped in my head, so I followed it.
Well, I think it's interesting going back to what you were saying about function too. Like this to me is a, you know, manifestation of this idea of art's function and the fact that, to try and explain something in words in 7 minutes feels impossible, but to be able to visually give someone something to react to feels possible.
Can
Feels, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Laura. I'm sorry. But I agree with you. Like the impact had to come first, right? Like you had to feel it
Yeah.
first. And then you can take in some of the statistics and understand why it's so important. But when it's an abstract idea for a community that's not impacted by it,
Mhm.
it's just that. You can hear it and be like, oh man, that's sad. But it's
Right.
not going to hit you the way that it should
Yeah.
until you've got something to hold on to, right? And so and the reason I jumped in, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure these, slides, at least on my screen, they're not terribly clear. But just to read off, this says in order, I am more than your desire, more than your fantasy, more than a mascot, ancestral love, prayer, sacrifice, your relative. So in the exhibition, this is my daughter on the far left in the I am t-shirt, and these are all my friends and relatives. My daughter took, well, first we lilied really loud because it was at a gala, and everybody shut up. And that was our hope, because galas are quite
Or
rowdy. Um, so we all lilied really loud, and the whole place went silent. And it was, and then my girl came up and took the stage wearing the I am t-shirt, and I asked everybody to pause for 5 seconds before the next person came up to build these concepts. So I am more than your desire. I am more than your fantasy, and on forth. And then we all turned around, and everybody's tribal affiliations is on the back of the t-shirts. And you had a moment to read that. And then we all turned around again. And then the four women in the middle fell back, and me and my daughter took the front of the stage holding hands, and it says, I am your relative. And I expressed to everybody the necessity of protecting all communities, all people. And when communities are vulnerable is when it perpetuates the possibility of violence towards communities when unfortunately, when predators know that a community is vulnerable, that's, that's what they're looking for, right? And so they'll find the cracks, they'll find the holes, they'll find where people aren't looking or where people aren't placing value and worth. And our communities face a tremendous amount of violence. So there's a whole movement called Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women or Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. If y'all haven't heard of it yet, please take a moment to look up the statistics, the amount of violence and sexual abuse that that is perpetuated on Native women is statistically proportionately tremendously high. And so asking, after we did this performance, and then I asked each of the women to introduce themselves and to say a little bit about who they are and what they do so that people then were reinforced with their humanity, right? And then I read some of the statistics and I explained to people, like, when you don't have Native people at the table, when you don't see Native people in mass media, when you don't see and hear from our communities, when we're not being included, when we're not being thought of, when we're not being protected, that in and of itself helps perpetuate these cycles. So in anybody's work, no matter what they're doing, they can advocate to make sure that Indigenous people are there and included and supported and protected and nurtured. So we've skipped way ahead into gallery two, but since we got on it, I mean, I think it's like it's a good example of what you're asking for. Like it's in line with everything that's embedded in the paintings and the beadwork and all, like it's all related concepts, but that one couldn't be done in a painting.
Right, right. That it revealed itself a different way. And I feel like I'm thinking about this space and the works that it's in relation to and how maybe formally different they are, but how conceptually tied they are. And I think some of the works I can sort of see peeking through behind her are these quiet strength paintings. And to me, you can tell me I'm wrong about where the titles come from, but there's something about the particularly these paintings on the my left, but all of them that, present very maybe straightforward or sort of graphically feel like there's like you can understand from this distance, but as you approach, you see, yeah, the texture and what is going on, and even the ways that colors are in conflict or in harmony, and this sort of vibration of these paintings sort of revealing that strength that maybe I don't know, feels more subtle at the outset.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, as you're saying, Laura, it is all very much interrelated. This particular body of work, Quiet Strength series, officially started in 2016, but this line work that you see on this slide is something that was in the first painting showed in this slideshow that I started doing in 2010, where I was mimicking the practices of porcupine quill work and lane stitch beadwork through paint. And in a lot of the earlier works leading up to 2016, they were kind of supplemental figures in the work. So it was a part of the work and it helped support specific conceptual ideas in each piece. But then in 2016, I made the first piece where it was like this statement has enough to be the statement. It possesses enough. It doesn't need to be a supporting actor. And so there's a whole series of works that are completely populated. It's really challenging to see the works and on, a tiny screen, even in print. I hope y'all can see them in person someday. But they're completely populated with this line work. And they're meant to, the title Quiet Strength is meant to honor our female relatives, so that our ancestral work and the way that work has contributed to how we understand art history today. So the reality is abstraction is a human practice, and it is practiced by communities globally in different formats, in different contexts. And abstraction was practiced here on this continent well before colonization began to take place, and alongside all of at the same time as all of the canonical, male abstract painters that we have learned in Western art history. And I know full well, as many people do, that those canonical European and European American male abstract painters were influenced deeply by Indigenous abstraction. And Indigenous abstraction is the practice of women on this continent. The vast majority of Indigenous abstraction that was practiced in, painted abstraction on stretched rawhide, as opposed to painted abstraction on stretched canvas, painted abstraction done in porcupine quill work or in beadwork, or in weaving or in basket making. I mean, these works were predominantly upheld until recent centuries by our female relatives. And so it's really important for me to position these works adjacent to their European or European American or even just American broadly abstractionists at large to express that the contributions of Indigenous people to the lineage of abstraction on this continent is foundational, and it's extremely important. It's not a side note. It's not um uh it's not it's it's not an asterisk like the way that it's been taught, and the histories of Native abstraction and the histories of Western abstraction have been completely influenced by one another and our lived relationships on this land base. But this title, Quiet Strength, is about the strength of our female relatives in the way that, like, when you look at like a fully beaded dress, or a fully quilled buffalo robe, or the painted parfleche works on stretched rawhide. I mean, that work starts with preparing the hide.
Yeah.
That work starts with the skill and the technical knowledge and the expertise of what it takes to tan a hide and to create the rawhide, right? And then to create the earth pigments, and then to create, profoundly beautiful abstract paintings that express deep philosophies and worldviews and understandings of our relationship with one another and with the land. And so when I look at our works and I look at some of the beautiful pieces that are in collections today, and I look at them and I feel the same kind of power and strength in that works that I do if I'm standing in front of a Mark Rothko. Like, people need to understand this, and so the works are really meant to honor the patience. That quiet strength is like this, like the because there's different form, like we create hierarchies in human traits as well, right? Like we're taught that academic strength, academic intelligence is the highest form of intelligence, but there's many, many forms of intelligence. And similarly, we're taught, physical prowess is the ultimate form of strength, but that's one kind of strength, right? There's many kinds of strength, and all are needed and important for healthy communities. Like when we all have our different forms of strength and our different forms of intelligence and we're functioning together, that's when we are best at our best as a community. So recognizing the strength that it takes, the resilience that our female relatives have contributed and that have created and had nurtured over many, many, many generations is what that body of work is about. And so, yeah, having it adjacent to the photo installation feels super relevant.
Yeah, I think I was reflecting on those different definitions of strength as you were talking too, and this idea of not just patience, but the sort of care that is inherent in both, the long history of Indigenous abstraction and quill work, and as you're talking about all of even the function of, beaded regalia as care. And I
Yeah.
think that's what you also are carrying forward
Mhm.
is this. the value of care as a sort of another definition of strength, maybe outside of our sort of, contemporary Western understanding of strength. And maybe that actually points too to the work that's on the screen that braids or braiding, sorry, I can't remember.
Great. Yeah.
Braid. And that sort of reference of care being about, attention, nurture, strength.
Mm-hmm. In this video, it toggles back and forth between a young Native woman, like anti-age, and a younger girl. She's braiding her hair, and then it goes into scenes where a young anti-age Black woman is braiding a young girl, Black girl's hair. Here's it. And the scenes are overlaid with the voices of me and my collaborating artist, Jovan Speller. It's both our moms. And we asked our moms questions around ideas of home and hair. And it was meant to be, or it is meant to be, this kind of poetic experience where and our moms didn't hear each other's interviews and they had no idea. So we just asked the same set of questions to the two moms. And it's really pretty amazing, the experiences that come out where people get, a view into understanding not only, this common practice within our cultures of nurturing one another through the act of braiding and the act of care, and what it means to sit with somebody and hands-on help take care of that person and their body and their spirit. And at the same time, we're asking them what their experiences were growing up around these two concepts of home and hair. And so quite naturally, each woman ends up speaking about the ways that racism have impacted them, and the way that that has come out through their concepts and their experiences around those two topics. And so the piece was really meant to point to the ways that we have so much in common, very unique experiences between our communities, but the way that our educational system and our societal system has been set up is we've really been kept separate from one another in many ways. But how do we start to look at our intersections and figure out and really learn how to cross-culturally nurture and support one another? So we made this piece, I can't remember what year it was. It was maybe 2018, somewhere in that timeline.
I'm
But yeah,
really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm done.
I was gonna say, I'm really struck by you talking about wanting to create that understanding of cross-cultural nurturing and care and creating this physical space that we're seeing right now. And I know that the curators and the institution have a lot to do with these design choices, but I feel like that's another moment of sort of really synthesis of ideas that, you're creating a space to experience this work um, that is in the work as well. Um,
Yeah,
I love all of these moments that you sort of created to experience this sort of maybe different kind of work in a different way that feels really special and really important. And again, this sort of real nod to collaborative efforts.
yeah, we really we pushed and moved and expanded, the ways that the institution, would maybe, or just arts, protocol at large. There's seating in every single gallery in this exhibition, and all of the seating is cushioned, and all of it is high enough for elders to get on and off. A lot of like modern contemporary seating that's in art museums is way too low for my mom to sit on. Like, so that was that was like my guidepost. I was like, if mom can't get on and off the couch, it's not good enough. Like, and it has to be comfortable because this is a huge exhibition. Like, it takes some effort to get through this space. So, things, they all have backs, they all have, well, these ones don't have the armrest, but the benches that are, independently standing benches all have armrests so people can get on and off of them. They all have the pillows and cushions, which are also part of my work and are my designs. It's meant to signal that like you're supposed to feel comfortable here. You're supposed to be here. Like, get comfortable, sit, visit, stay a while. Like, rejuvenate before you move on to the next space, look at the work or chill for a bit, like, but all of it is extremely intentional because of the harm that was done between the Walker and the Native community at the hands of the events around the um, putting up and taking down the scaffold sculpture, and then the Jimmy Durham exhibition happening here at the Walker back to back. There was a lot of division that happened, and so my work, to take on this exhibition in this space was about making certain that our community felt and understood that they were 100% that this space is their space. The reality is our public art spaces are meant to be for the public, period, which is everybody, right? And Indigenous people, this is, this Walker is on Indigenous homelands. This is Dakota homelands. And so for the Dakota people and all other Native people here to feel like, this space wasn't for them, or that it didn't hear them, or wasn't seeing them or listening to them, or being honored by them, that's a big deal, right? And so we worked really hard to make sure that this exhibition felt phenomenally loving, and I knew that if we were able to succeed in that when Native people walk into these galleries, if they feel loved in this space, then everybody will feel loved in this space. And I know that from experiences where other underrepresented communities have, been nurtured and upheld and celebrated in other spaces. And when I get to experience those, I get filled up, right? And so I get to see the ways that there's hope, for good human relations, and like we all need that. And those are opportunities where I get to learn, hear the stories of another community, and that helps me practice empathy and compassion for somebody that I don't have the same lived experience of, right? And so those were our goals. We have these touch stations so you can get into touching the work. And we have, areas where people can feel porcupine quill work who have never been introduced to that art form. They can feel and touch beadwork, and they can feel and touch this buckskin fringe. So all of that, the exhibition design was all 100% around, like, and there's a video room with beanbag chairs, and there's, a sitting area at the end of the exhibition where you can sit back and watch Art 21 videos. And there's cards where young people can draw pictures or leave like their own love letters of what their experience was like. Like it kind of goes on and on about and then that goes into the programming as well.
Right. Something you just said about if it feels like it is for the Indigenous community, it also will feel like it is for everyone. I'm paraphrasing. I don't think I got that quite right, but it made me think about some of the formal moves that you make in your work that have really specific references to, your own community, your own understanding of a history of, beadwork or forms, and yet the way that you're sort of making them and approaching them can feel universal as well. I think maybe that's sort of one of your points about abstraction being sort of so fundamental to our understanding of just the way we organize our own brains. But I'd be interested to hear a little bit about some of the forms that you use in your work, and maybe this is a nice example, and how they feel accessible at different maybe levels to different audiences, and whether that's important to you.
It's 100% important to me, and I've been doing it in a lot of different ways for quite some time. And part of why there's a few different reasons, but one of the reasons why we loosely organized the exhibition chronologically is because it kind of moves through the different moments of me figuring that out, so I went to tribal college for undergraduate years to get my associates, and my bachelor's degree was at Haskell Indian Nations University and the Institute of American Indian Arts, where we really focus on and teach art history and art practices from an Indigenous perspective. And then I went back into mainstream graduate school. And during that time, I really had to figure out how to bring all of the knowledge and the practices that I had learned and refined and practiced in tribal college and then thrive within a mainstream American graduate school system. And I had to figure out how to merge those practices, models, and histories in a way that felt relevant to me and to my lived experience, right? And so I think I've been thinking about the different audiences, really specifically since that time. Like
Yeah.
how do I stay true to myself? How do I make sure that, my work is super accessible to Native audiences and people? Because for me, that's my, like, I see my audiences as like concentric circles, and I want to reach all the way out. I want to reach all of them. But I reach first to the community that has raised and nurtured me the most, and then I just know if I tie my lived experiences to my communities and the way my communities are connected to other communities and the way that there are intersections between those ripples and the way that they affect and shape one another, then it can ripple all the way out to just human experience,
Mhm.
right? And that is, I think, for me, like, that is it's the most honest approach, and my friend Rose Simpson and I, when we were younger, we talked a lot about that, about honesty in our practices and what our lived experiences are, and how you travel with as much honesty as possible. And I really credit her for those conversations, and it helped guide the way I was thinking about it over time too. Um, and my lived experience is a mixed experience. I'm Sichangu Lakota through my mom, and I'm German and Welsh through my dad. And I grew up in the city, and I grew up going back and forth to visit our family in Rosebud. And I have, both tribal college and mainstream school experience. I have, forms of education that have been cultural and informal, and forms of education that have been super formal, and it all comes out in the work, right? And so I am a byproduct of my environment, and it's important for me to be able to reach everybody that stands in front of the work. And so I think about, okay, so the Native audience might cue into this immediately, but how is it also impactful for a non-Native audience that maybe won't get there eventually, but then once they're told about it, they'll be like, oh, cool, now I get it, right? But I loved it before I knew that. So I actually work really hard to make sure that the works operate in a way that impact you physically first. So that when you stand in front of the work, every human person that stands in the front of the work can feel it before they have to get into the cognitive and think about it, or before they choose to get into it. And then depending on how deep they want to take it, they can go as far as they want, or they can just be filled up by the presence of beauty, right? And the way that that's nurturing and healing. So I could talk about that topic for a while, but I better stop
No.
now.
Well, I just want to pick up on the sort of the physicality part of it and feeling something physically, and that I think your material shifts the way that you were sort of using material, whether it is paint or beads, or well, maybe we can skip forward since I know we're getting close on time to some of the newest mediums that you're using. Those all have such an impact on how physically you see things and scale. And I can see throughout the whole show and knowing your work that you're thinking, um, you know, really considering scale as an important sort of driver in what form a work takes and how someone might experience. So maybe since we just have a few minutes left before questions, you could talk a little bit about this maybe most recent work and the experimentation of material here with the enamel.
hmm So this sculpture in the center is titled Infinite We, and it is glass enamel on copper plates. Each quadrant um, is so let's see here. Each rectangle, like if you take a look at the very bottom row, you pick you look in the center, there's a rectangle that has a black triangle on one half and that light red on the other half. That's one plate. So there's a skeletal brass structure that is all of these individual plates are assembled into this to make the entire, there you go, that's helpful. Thanks. Um, so each one of these is a glass enamel fired and to create this sculpture. And it's been a beautiful experience to work. I've gotten to work with a few different studios now in glass, mosaic, float glass, like architectural installation. And then these are the pieces that I told you about at the beginning that I wrote to help get support to create this sculpture. And on the back wall and the installation image of this was four glass mosaics, but painting size instead of like big public art size. And it's just been a wonderful journey because when I first got to, I've worked with a few different places, but the first one I ever got to work with was Franz Mayer of Munich in Germany. And when I first got there and they were giving me a tour of the studio and showing me all the different supplies and the glass and they were showing me the colors and they started talking to me about the limitations of colors and glass. And I stopped them and I was like, wait, I already know this. I was like, I work in beads and beads are glass. And it took me to actually get to Germany and be in the studio to be like, oh yeah, same material, different form. And so being able to experiment, like it's been really fun for me because the, you know, I was practicing refining my skills in beadwork, and then I got to learn porcupine quill work when I was at the Institute of American Indian Arts and parfleche painting and all of that. And then that all translated into different forms of my painting practice. So then I was painting references to those practices. And then when I started incorporating bugle beads into the work, which is what the great big Wopila piece and a lot of these other pieces are made out of, it was like the bugle bead was referencing the painted line, which was referencing the quills, and the lane stitch beadwork, which was referencing quills. And then I've been able to mimic those same interpretations in glass mosaic and then in this big sculptural form. So in the sculptural form, you know, we created 40 new colors with the company that we worked with, and we worked with a studio in Italy, and we created those colors based off of beadwork because it's still glass, right? And so it's been so fun for me to like follow this path of relationship with a material that I didn't even necessarily set out to do. It just has been kind of naturally evolved, and you know, through listening, you know, and paying attention to those moments and those histories and thinking about the way, because to me, not only is it like this material exploration over time, but it's also a continued exploration of the reality of relationships and how our relationships drive these outcomes, right? Because this work doesn't happen without me going to Italy
Right.
and having a cross-cultural relationship with folks who are like profoundly talented at what they do, you know, and like thinking about the way that like the Venetian beads were just such a coveted trade item here from Native people in the States, and check beads and you know, like those are trade items in our communities, you know, and we rolled with those trade items so hard that now beadwork is synonymous with Indigenous artwork. And it's a European trade item. Like it's important for people to remember that and to hold that. And so it comes through relationships. Some of those relationships are quite strife, you know, but you know, there's beauty in it too, right? And like, how do we figure out and hold on to the beautiful parts, address the wounds, and figure out how to move forward as healthily as possible?
Um, I love that the thinking about how to move forward and while still holding on to the understanding of history and conflict. I want to make sure that we um, also make time to talk about that idea of relationship when it comes to closer to home in your own studio and how sort of an expanded studio practice, how that shift has led to these relationships too. And I know we're eager to get to questions, but I also know that you'd
Yeah.
be sad to not talk about that.
Okay, I'll do it as fast as I can. So, this one on the left, this is a pretty good slide. This one on the left is the third in the Wopila series. So we already looked at the first Wopila on that intersecting wall. And that's a 8 foot by 14 foot fully beaded painting. And that was the piece that was commissioned for the 2022 Whitney Biennial. And that piece transitioned the entire nature of my studio. I had one studio assistant that I was working with at the time, part-time. And then I naively thought when I got that commission that I was like, well, we'll bring on 3 more people. So we should be able to do it with 4 people. And then we got into it, and that wasn't possible in the timeline that we had. And so we kept adding people, and then we would get so far and I would do the math and figure out we weren't going to make it, and we'd add more people. And eventually 18 people helped bead that work. 18 people working for 11 months to bead that work. And my time was well beyond the 11 months. That's just the beading part of it. But it was, and then after that piece was accomplished, we had other works to do and like other commissions. And so 8 people stayed on. And now in the studio, the number ebbs and flows, but right now we have 11 people. And for these pieces, visiting 1 and 2, these are 10-foot and 12-foot fully beaded sculptures. There's been times where there's more than 20 people again for a period of time, and then it goes back down to the kind of core group. But my studio is very family and community grounded. So it's my daughter works here, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, one of their cousins. My friend Tom Jones, his auntie and his niece and his nephew work here. Oh, I got 3 nieces working here now because another one just moved here recently. And then other Native community members that live here in the Twin Cities have worked here for different periods of time, and a couple still work here now. And then we only have 2 non-Native people that work here at the studio, but they're part of the Twin Cities arts community. And so this space is very much, grounded in community and in relationships, and it comes through in these pieces. So these 2 pieces, visiting 1 and 2, are the first time that my studio members had any creative freedom. So before, I was creating the compositions and creating the templates, and then I would do the beginning of the beadwork and then show them this is exactly how I want it done. So they're just helping me do the fill. They're helping me produce the thing that, physically I can't do on my own in a reasonable amount of time. And then with these pieces, I wanted to work with the idea of a crazy quilt, where you're putting together a quilt with your fabric scraps. So you have to create a composition with what you have available. And so I wanted to do that with beadwork. And so I told them to go ahead and go into the bead library, and I gave them, a certain amount of dimensions and things that I was thinking about, ideas that I was thinking about. And I told them to like have at it and create, so every time they sit down and loom a strip of beadwork, they weren't making exactly what I needed, mathematically to fill a different composition. They were getting to do their own composition each time they sat down at the loom. And then I worked with that information to create compositions from what was available. But these pieces are also meant to signal generational visiting, because I made them in honor of my friend Jim Denemy, who made a sculpture this same format. And he made his to honor George Morrison, who had made a sculpture this same format. So meaning just like the tall rectangular shape. But each are in their own unique styles. George's is very much in his wood assemblage, beautiful, phenomenal abstraction. And then Jim's is a painting, and mine's beadwork. And so all the pieces commingle and visit with each other and represent all those people and all those relationships.
Right. I love that. And I just I don't know, continual evolution of your own practice to sort of like allow for other people's creativity, but also to I don't know, just allow for time for community and being in relation, even though it wasn't, maybe from the outset you weren't making a convening space of your studio, but that's what it sort of becomes, and that feels really true to the rest of your practice and your way of being as well. So I love that those works got to be in conversation with Jem and George's work in New York last year, but then also get to live in this other space in conversation with your own works and your own history.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the last thing I'd like to say about that, just in response to what you just said, Laura, is that, I really, I'm human and fallible and make mistakes and but I try really hard to make the decisions that I make in regards to the studio, in regards to my practice, in regards to the people that share the space with me, guided by our value systems, guided by, how we are in community within our community systems. So guided by Lakota philosophies and values and my own. And so I just think that that's possible. I think it's possible to think about how you're going to work in collaboration with people, not necessarily in adherence to how it's been done in the art world so far, but how do you do it in a way that aligns with your own life, in the way that you want to be in relationship with people. And you could take bits and, tidbits and, you can take from other models that you've seen in the past, and you can adapt it to what makes sense to your life and to your goals with your own work.
I think that's a wonderful acknowledgement of the importance and difficulty of um, framing those relationships and yeah. I think that we maybe have come to questions. Does that sound right? I'm getting sort of nods.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. This was such a wonderful conversation to listen to. The first question comes from Noah, and you touched on this a bit already, Diani, but I'll give Noah a chance to unmute.
Yeah, Dyani, thank you so much for this presentation. It's nice to see you. You did touch on my question already, but I have another one if you don't want to talk about this one. It was about the Walker and sort of the issues in 2017 with scaffold and sort of invoking the Dakota 38+2. So the question really was, what is it meant for you to put together this exhibition and then for your community as well, and sort of in doing so and engaging with the Walker as an institution, do you feel like there's really been a dialectic of repair happening? And then the second question that I sort of had was actually about your visiting series and thinking about a lot of your work is about putting Indigenous abstraction within a larger canon of North American abstraction. Um, but also thinking about how there is a value too in sort of reading Indigenous intellectual and aesthetic history through works. And in visiting, especially in the pairing of Morrison and Denominy, I really see that happening. So then sort of wondering how you are really balancing those analytic registers.
Good questions. Oh my gosh, I'll do my best to go fast. I, before I even said yes to this exhibition, I thought long and hard about it. I prayed about it. I talked to other people about it. It's scary, because uh, the risk is in many ways mine. Because if it's not done right, or if for some reason people in the Walker weren't able to carry it through with the most intentionality and the most care, and that we weren't able to really like do the things that I had hoped to or intended to do, then that would have potentially impacted my relationships with my own community. And that is of utmost importance to me. And there are people who won't step foot in this space, and I respect that. And that's okay. Everybody has to make their decision. I had talks with friends who are like, oh, no, 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 I haven't been there since. And I was like, that's all right. And I was like, just come see the show. You don't have to forgive anybody if you're not ready. That's all right. But come see the show because I made it for you. Like I made this show for you. This is a gift for you, and I hope that you will get filled up by this and see yourself, your community, your ancestors, your relatives, your loved ones reflected in this space and truly celebrated in this space. And I hope that is nurtures your heart, and what you choose to do in regards to your relationship to the larger entity of the museum. That's your journey, and you get to do that at whatever pace is right for you. But I also, we had long talks, like they have actually been doing very significant things that made me feel confident that they would be willing to work with me to make it how I envisioned. So there are, I believe, 3 Native board members now. There is free admission for all Native people. And I'm not even gonna be able to list all of them. But their collection has gone up significantly. They have programming for all, like, training for employees where they can go visit sacred sites around here and learn about Dakota history. There's access to Dakota language. Like they're really, and leadership has changed, and leadership changed and knew when that change happened. Like they got to see and come in on the tail end of all of that conflict. And so they knew that there was major repair work to be done, and they've been committed to it. And like I said, I'm not going to have the whole list memorized, but my dear friend Layli Long Soldier, she wrote for the catalog, and at first she was like, well, how about, she's like, I want a list of everything they've done. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's ask them, like, and they were all for it. They're like, yeah, let's do it. And like, so they've been actually really joyfully on this ride with me. And like, not a single person has asked me, could you not say that publicly, or could we maybe not lead with that? Like, nobody has asked me to edit the way that I'm speaking about these things. Nobody has asked me to shy away from the topics. Nobody has asked me, it's just like everybody has been game for making it better, and there's different kinds of activism, and we need all the roles. Like I truly do. Like I feel like I learned that as a teenager, just looking at and thinking about Martin Luther King's roles versus Malcolm X's role. Like we needed both those men and all of their female counterparts, like, but we need every single person, like, and it's because you need people, you need artists, and you need people at the front line, you need philanthropy, you need all sorts of different roles to fight the good fight, right? And it comes through different forms and fashion, and it's important. And so, like, for me, I believe in my role, I just so strongly believe that, like, these spaces are for us, damn it. And if we don't go in and do the work and claim the space and ask people to do things, to do right by us and to advocate for that consistently, then how are we going to get there? And so if you find yourself in a position where there are people that are truly committed and that they actually want to do that work, then yeah, I'll show up and do the work with you, you know? But it was because I saw what they had done up until that point too, before we did this, that made me feel like, okay, you're already investing. You're already investing in real ways, And then honestly, the investment of this exhibition, like, big, huge survey exhibitions of Indigenous artists, there aren't that many. There aren't that many. So that is a real investment. And it's one of the things I've been advocating for in my practice, not just for me, but for Native people and underrepresented artists at large. Like, make the real investments. Give us big public art projects. Give us big solo exhibitions. Give us big catalogs. Give us things that help us change the format of our learning of our institutions to these more equitable spaces. Like, we can't get there without that kind of investment. So they made the investment, we have a big, beautiful catalog with lots of wonderful, beautiful voices that got paid well and honored through the whole process, We have the exhibition, all of our programming is very intentional around who's, like, there's not a single program where I'm talking about my work. The programs are all about where it's just me doing an artist talk, because there's plenty of those in the world. The programs are about the people that have been involved, or giving opportunities for some of the younger artists or for the studio artists to come in and have their time to talk about their work or to lead workshops or whatnot. So it's, and they have just been in support of all of that. So again, it's up to people on, their comfort level. Some people might need to see more than that, or longer periods of time for that, and that's okay, you know. But that's why I said, like, we just work so hard to make sure that, our communities feel really celebrated. We just hosted a group of 19 students and 2 faculty members from my reservation travel college in South Dakota this weekend. There's a busload of kids from Meskwaki that came 2 weekends before that. We've really been working hard to make sure that this is a gift to community. And I better just leave it that one question. But no, you and I'll have an opportunity to visit in the future. So yeah. Thanks for the good question.
Yes, thank you for that question, Noah, and that answer, Dyani. The next question is from an anonymous audience member who first thanks you both for the conversation and asks Dyani if you could tell us a bit more about an average day in the studio.
Oh man, somebody else asked me that recently. There is no average day. That's why it's led with, oh man. It shifts so much, and
Wait,
there's,
I'm just
oh,
going to
go
say
ahead.
also Dyani is the subject of an amazing Art 21 that just came out that does give some real insight into the studio. It doesn't answer that question entirely, but is definitely worth watching to
Yeah,
understand some of the practice and the people that are there making with Dyani.
Laura. I guess it's maybe average for more of the folks that are here, that work here, than it is for me. So we're here Monday through Friday, 10 to 6-ish, 10-ish to 6-ish, depending on the person. And I have a studio manager, and then everybody else that works here supports the beadwork that goes into the pieces. We have 2 spaces, one that houses all of the people, and all the windows, and then the space that I'm in right now that is my space that houses the painting, and none of the windows, but we're working on that. And my practice, it varies so much, and I kind of had the big response because um, as much as I would like it to be more predictable, the nature of this job is not predictable. So it requires a lot of travel, and I'm going and doing talks or going and doing, exhibitions or residencies or whatever, or going to help, with the work fabrication in different countries or in different studios, or I'm working with printmakers. So I'm all over the place. And I think I had the oh man response because I feel like, and maybe this is encouraging for some artists, because it's maybe good just to wrap our heads around it, because when you're in a place of acceptance, you can roll with things in a way that is as healthier than like resisting, right? But like, it is the forever fight to find time to paint. It's been that way forever. Like, as an undergraduate, as a graduate, and ever since graduate school ended, which for me was in 2011. Finding and making the room and the time and the space to paint and to do beadwork and to be hands-on, it's like always like kind of about like taking care of all the things that have to be taken care of so I can move that all out of the way and make, right? So today when I'm done with this, I'll be painting and I'm really excited. Um, and it really varies. It varies on what we're working on. Sometimes, when we're making those big sculptures, it's weeks on end of figuring out compositions, and then it's assembling everything. Or it's preparing, panels, and there's times when we're making great big stuff where I'm like, you'll see on the Art 21 video, I might be climbing around over something and laying out, geometry for days on end. And so it just really varies on what we're working on at the moment. But I try to be here when I'm in town. I'm here, minimally 5 days a week. And around that, try to take care of my body and my family.
Thank you for that answer. And then I have the last question. I'm really curious to know how each of your works start, like from paintings to your sculptures. Are you drawing first? Are you sketching? Are you taking photographs?
That depends as well. My sketching practice is pretty crude. So I have sketchbooks both in paper format and in digital format. And generally the paintings start in my imagination, and then I will make a thumbnail sketch with notes so I don't forget it. But as long as I have the thumbnail sketch with the basic composition and then color notes and my intention of what I imagined, then I'll remember it if I have the little memory reminder of this like little sketch. Every once in a great while, I plan things out more robustly. But for the really big beaded works, not the visiting pieces, but the really big two-dimensional beaded works, I plan those out digitally. So my sketchbook is, Adobe Illustrator in those moments, because everything has to be mathed like to perfection, as it's not perfection, but close enough. And then for public artworks, same thing, that I do, like I'll do a physical sketch, pen to paper, pencil to paper, and then translate that into a digital rendering so that we can do all of our planning, so it just depends on the piece. I mean, some of them are like, I could show you the sketches and it's pretty funny that like that's like that's it, that's all you got. I'm like, yep. But I know what I'm gonna do. And so it's just about like, here's the base thing, don't forget it, because when you don't do that, so many pieces like come and go if you're not like recording them and holding on to them for later. So it's mostly about catching them.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Dyani. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Sarah from Dyani Studio, Rachel from Walker Arts Center, and Wang Yi from Alexander Gray Associates for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. We're currently raising $200,000 before the end of the year. A donation directly supports our writers, our staff, and operations. You can support our winter campaign through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow for our 1300th episode at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Liz Collins and Lynn Cook on the event of Liz Collins' Motherlode at RISD Museum. And as Israel tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
so
much.
much.
Thank
Thank you.
Congratulations
Diani.
on the show.
Thanks so much. Thank you,
Diani,
Laura.
thanks,
Thank you,
Laura.
Laura.
Thank you, Diani. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Congratulations! Whoa! Thank you, Laura.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Thank
Keep
painting
up the
today,
great work.
Diani.
Thank you,
Happy
Chloe.
painting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danny.
Happy
Thank you.
painting. Bye,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you all
Bye.
so much. Thanks, Laura.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Dyani. This is an honor.
Oh, I appreciate you all. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm
Looks
excited
like it's a great crew.
to do this with you.
Such wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you,
All right, everybody.
everyone.
Safe travels.